as soon as a plant enters the flowering stage, the insects are no longer interested in the leaf. It's only the vegetative stage where the insects are really heavy. So looking across here, this crop is coming into the stage of flowering, and the leaf appears to be improving. Now, whether it's the extra sprays or not, I can't say. But what I'm suggesting is that the nitrogen profile of this plant is changing, and the insects are no longer interested. So what we've got to do is make sure that the nitrogen profile in the young plants is similar, and then we will stop this heavy insect infestation.
Of a multi-generational legacy, intergenerational and multi-generational. I think when you set a vision, right, and I think the strength that we're feeling now, say compared to in 2009, is that, wow, what's the next decade going to look like? Given that we've journeyed the last decade, and we're getting actually really excited because we're breaking through into the marketplace. People are, and actually the produce itself speaks for themselves, and then the lab tests. But also our growers have stayed with us. How many PK? Did I asked how many? 60? 80?
Yeah, we are close to 60 of growers at the moment. Yeah, and we are still nurturing more at the right now.
So they stayed with us through COVID. So what you had said about their deep understanding, right, Pinket? I think that's almost like how do we then have this transmitted, this knowledge? So if you imagine that maybe this is the first decade of regenerative agriculture, right, in 2000, so maybe second decade, Steve's second decade, right? Then now we're having at least 60 growers on this farm that is generating from tomatoes, to leafy, to root crops, to basically the peppers, right? And actually at the field, we haven't really brought to market is we've got the fruit trees there as well, right? And then we've got some permaculture bananas as well, because Pinket came back from Australia in 2009 making all these bananas, and so it's like I'm seeing like, it may not be Jeff Lawton's 7 layers of edible forest in 10 years, but we somehow have a very interesting space, right, of something that is already very edible. It's very interesting. We've got the 2 acres of Moon River Lodge where mom and dad went and really fruit the vision with their bare hands, growing everything that that's there. They felt the instinct, they grew it. So we've got that model. We've got the farm that is commercial, and then we've got the forest that actually has food, and both of you are triggering 2 things in me, right? Or catalyzing something in me. So Pinket has said the low footprint somehow is also helping with the integrated pest management. You don't have to fight so hard, right? And then maybe something from the forest is also helping with the pest management, right? And then Steve, you had mentioned the word Refugia. Can you share with us what that is?
Yeah, Refugia it's a term that I came up against, was introduced to when I was living and working in Western New South Wales, which is a very, very large broadacre monoculture space, right? And the Refugia was seen as a very important natural buffer and balancing space or area where beneficial insects, birds, reptiles, all those natural organisms, and of course the plant species was was there to provide refuge. In other words, a habitat. It really is a refugia is really about habitat, and the more diverse, the better. And of course, where you are located in Cameron Highlands is a very, very diverse and wonderful part of the world, and it really does fit the definition of refugia, particularly when your farm is nestled into that environment. Unlike a lot of broadacre farms in Australia, which is tabletop flat, no trees can be seen for miles, and then these relatively small refugia areas that are left behind. Whereas you've got a wonderful tropical melting pot of diversity there that can help. It probably helps with your climate control as well. Although I know things do change up in the Cameron Highlands, unlike down on the coast. You do get seasons where your farm is located.
Yeah, but the plants seem to have settled in, if you will, right?
Yeah.
And somehow the growers also understand how to nurture them in the environment so that they're healthy. They have the good nutrition that we feed and care for the plants. And it seems like being nestled in this very immediate refugia, because we are farming around 2% of the whole land area that we are stewarding. So in June, Pinkett and I were looking at June 2021. We're just looking at each other. We are going like, actually, we don't know what usually you go and say, what are we doing wrong, right? This time we are looking like, what are we doing right? What are we doing right? Like, why? Some of our fixed assets, our capex were already very tired. The wheat mats already torn, and because it was COVID, and we were just coming back to like how do we get everything back again, right? We couldn't enter quite a lot of the farm areas. Like 2021 was my first time back in Malaysia after 3 years. So something like that, and yet the farm kept producing, and the crops looked better than ever. They were happy, because. Then we say, oh my, it's like the lab experiment had kind of found it's coming into its own, and Pinkett, I love the word that you used just now. The flow is there. The flow, yeah.
So I think the other thing that we are quite lucky to have is really our own water catchment. So we are in a very energy efficient zone for growing. So in the sense that we, compared to say trying to grow something in the lowlands, tropical lowlands, a lot of energy will be used to grow more. Like you need to probably use water from the piped in water. You probably need to use electricity to power a lot of machinery. So we are very, very fortunate in that sense. So energy efficient. Some of our growing systems do not even need power to run them. So they just use gravity. And water is good. I think there's something in the water that's beneficial to the growing, like all the trace elements and all that being collected from our own catchment.
And the pH of the water and all these things have to be maintained, as you know, in hydroponic, to make sure that the nutrients are available.
We have the buffer because we have the 1,000 acres buffer. I think that's when you say it again, the natural buffer, right? And the water in there is and we have such low footprint of humans as well as built environment, and of course even productive agriculture. like the way you said, we had just shaped it enough to be able to just put the greenhouses. Yeah, so it's sometimes you chance upon it, right? The answer. We couldn't have designed it like just using a blueprint and then go about building it. I think there was a lot of discovery in it.
One, you must have a host plant that's weak. Two, you must have a pathogen that is ready to attack. It's in the right spore, whatever. Three, you must have environmental conditions that favour the pathogen. If you get those three things happening at the same time, then you're very likely to get disease of some sort. But we can control two of those things. We can't control the weather, but we can make sure that our soils, our drainage, maybe our shelter, whatever we've got, we make sure that we can, make the best of any change in the weather. So we can cope with some extremes. But we can make a strong plant nutritionally, and we can influence the amount of inoculum that is in the environment, either through proactive treatments that will reduce inoculum, including hygiene. Farm hygiene is really important. A very learned professor, Dr. Elaine Ingham from Soil Food Web Institute, has determined that roughly 70% of your disease problems and insect problems come from your own farm. They don't blow in from the next door neighbour. You got a lot of farmers say, "Oh, that guy, I got my disease from him. You know, I'm a good farmer, but he's a bad farmer." No. 70% of your problems occur here, and the refugia you have is unique, and that is, now that we talk about it, it could be one of the major reasons for the results, the sustainability, the fact that refugia also can act as a filter for contaminants.
Yeah. There's a lot of talk now about the forest being the most efficient climate technology, etc. Right? So perhaps it could also be. I don't have the science, and I wouldn't say it here, but it's. Yeah, I don't know if we can do more work to see, you know, what is happening right, apart from just the protocols, right? How much of this natural buffer do we need, right? So if we were to have to write it as a blueprint for another farm that wants to move from chemical to natural farming, right? What is the proportion of refugia that you need in the greenhouse, you know? So something like that. Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah, we will need a different group of scientists here, won't we? Yeah, but for the farm, just one more clarification, Steve. You had mentioned soil, but I noticed we also grow with growing media. When you say soil, do you also mean growing media, or are you talking really about soil?
Well, the short answer would be no. Soil and growing media do have different parameters to consider. Soil is a buffer in its own right because of the minerals and the what we call cation exchange of many soils. Initially when I started working with the crops, it was mainly, my main interest was to work with the soils, because I knew how to balance them and how to get the best out of them. When it came to the media, the crops grown in media and with basically a drip to waste type of irrigation system, because cocoa peat and other media are fairly consistent and stable, you don't really have to do much to modify them. Soils can get really out of balance after many, many years, or they could be inherently infertile, or they could be infertile because they've been over farmed. So you can fix the soil, but with media, you're changing it quite a lot, and also with hydroponics, you have a lot of control over nutrition. And so what we did there was we looked at two possibilities, and one was to introduce that organic matter component, but in a soluble form. And what that was doing was complexing the soluble minerals, and that made a lot of difference to the way that the crops took the minerals up and utilised them. Without that carbon balancing, all those minerals are available immediately when the crop takes up water. Because they're all soluble, whereas in soils, a lot of your minerals are insoluble, and they have to become soluble through the action of microbes and plant roots. But in hydroponics and in water-run irrigation systems, all your nutrients are basically soluble. So you have to give them some mechanism to make them available when the plant needs them. So the plant actually chooses what it needs and when it needs it. And that was the major difference, I think, that we brought into the greenhouse crops. The other thing, I think it's still evolving, is the use of biology. Obviously, soils have their own biology, but growing media and hydroponic systems have less. And in a lot of cases, conventional growers will suppress biology because they see it as bad. Yeah, so what we've got to do, we've got to mimic our soil situation and have a source of organic carbon that buffers and chelates minerals, and we've got to have some biology in there.
Right. So
I think on our end, how we have experienced it is actually in it's a lot it's a lot for anyone to understand, like what Steve had described, right? And for us to explain this to our growers, it was tough, right? But at the end of the day, we did what Steve had described, and through his protocols, and I think the result really was very convincing in better quality crops, longer shelf lives, better tasting, and also the whole process of not using chemicals really supported the whole cell in development in the crops. So that itself resulted in very good quality crops. So I think from that, our growers had suddenly, wow, this is working. So they themselves would want to do it, and that to grow healthier plants, which will result in healthier produce, better quality produce.
So it's really trusting the nature, right? As you said, the biology of cells, regeneration, and instead of suppressing it with chemical pesticides.
Yeah.
Wow. So everyone is thriving. So
we are in at the tip of the iceberg, because a lot of what Steve has mentioned, like what the source of organic matter, carbon, things that we could add to our fertigation system is really coming in. We have a lot more to work with right now and going forward. So I think with more continuous work and exploration with Steve, I think there's a lot to look forward to, in what we can do together.
I think this is going to be the most watched 60 minutes, okay? So there's a documentary called 60 Minutes, right? So we were kind of trying to beat that documentary or match it or be inspired by it. So what I'm going to do is we are at 60 minutes almost. I've recorded this in Zoom. So what we'll do is I will try and edit it, but not too much, as we were all talking. It came to me that we have basically recorded a session of Green Champion dialogues. Yeah.
There's really only two things that affect the soil: the liquid humate fertigation and the side dressing. But over the top of that, we have the foliar program.